Okay, well, let's get started. So first, I want to say thank you, everyone, for choosing to spend your morning with us. My name is Kim Mozingo, and I'm with DefTech. I'll be facilitating our discussion this morning. Just a reminder that we are recording, so if you don't want to be recorded, you're free to block your camera and mute your mic. And please actually keep your mic muted until you're ready to speak. So we all have background noises. Everybody's doing, 5 things at once. So that would be helpful. So this morning, I'll talk first a little bit about DefTech, what we are and what we're doing, explain the purpose of our discussion, and introduce our speakers, and then we'll get into the meat of everything. So DevTech is a program that is funded by the Federal Economic Development Administration. It's a program of the Maryland Department of Commerce. We work with businesses to help them connect with the federal labs, whether that is to do things like license the intellectual property that's available, or to connect them through a cooperative research and development agreement, or as you'll see with Olena, we helped her in another way with the federal lab. So this morning, our first speaker is Olena Lahr, who is the founder and CEO of Molecular Tools. I met Olena when I participated as a mentor in an accelerator in Frederick, run by FITSE. And Olena became a DefTech client so that she was looking for help on an SBIR that she was writing, and felt it would be useful to connect with the lab. So we were able to facilitate her connection to the lab, and of course had kept in touch since then. We also met Ashok Kapur, who is the founder and CEO of Hawkeye MedTech, through that same accelerator, and have been supporting his work, especially in his recently released telemedicine app, which is called TotalCare. And Olena and Ashok will tell you more about their businesses when they speak. They also both attended at one of the kind of exclusive events that we have that are just for our clients. We host these events to help people connect and network with the people that they need to meet. We were very intentional about that. In following up with Olena after that to see how she felt the event went and see if there was anything else we could do, I asked her, please, let us know if there's someone that we can introduce you to, or if there's an issue that you're having that we can help facilitate. So as we began that conversation, she talked about some challenges that she has in this space, this getting into the medical supply chain, and she'll talk about the tests that she's developing and some of those challenges. So the complexity of this issue just led us to the idea of hosting an in-person forum, hopefully in person, and hopefully this fall, so that we can sort out getting medical tests and equipment and supplies that you are developing, the entrepreneurs and business owners that are on this meeting today. How do you get into the medical supply chain? What's the best way to do that? What's the sequence of events that you should be taking? So our purpose today is not so much to provide answers. We don't have a lot of answers right now. We're really wanting to facilitate a discussion and a conversation so that we can clarify the questions that we want to answer at a forum in the fall. Just briefly, our format today will be to hear first from Olena, who will introduce herself and the work she's doing with Molecular Tools. And she's going to provide us with her current thinking on the process and some of the challenges that she's had. We'll then talk to Ashok Kapur with Hawkeye MedTech. Besides the TotalCare app that Ashok has developed and has launched and is using now and is offering in a variety of places, he also has a deep understanding of the medical supply chain, as he does distribute medical supplies, and has been doing so for a number of years. So Ashok has an interesting perspective on this. He has some understanding of the issues, and he's also going to talk about the importance of keeping an eye on your ROI as you're going through this process, maintaining a business mindset. There's no point in developing a test if you're going to go broke doing it eventually. We also hope to discuss the challenges of identifying and connecting with your customer base prior to completing development so that you understand that you are developing a product or a service or a test that meets a defined need, so that when you do get closer to the entering into the medical supply chain, that you reduce the risk of not being 100% sure, and you can't get to 100%, but not being as sure as you possibly can that the product or the test that you're developing actually will provide value to customers, meaning that they will then exchange money for the thing that you're developing. And we will have time for question and answer. I don't want to say we're going to wait to the end. We use the chat window, which if you look in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, you'll see a little chat icon. You can use that to send your questions in, and we'll pause and ask you to unmute your mic so that you can have a conversation. We don't want this to be all one-sided. So thank you again for choosing to spend your time with us this morning. We hope that this is fruitful for everyone and that we engage in good discussion and come away with a clearer understanding of the kinds of questions that we need to have answered in the fall. And with that, I will turn it over to Olena. Olena? You might have to unmute your mic.
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Olena Lar, and I'm founder and CEO of Molecular Tools. I am a scientist by training, and together with another scientist, we started Molecular Tools in 2018 with the goal of converting a new scientific method into a commercial research test. And it seemed like a very simple thing. But in the process of doing that, we've realized that the test has more potential than we thought initially, and it has potential for a clinical application as a diagnostic tool for early diagnosis of subarachnoid hemorrhage, bleeding into the compartment surrounding the brain. So we started exploring this area, and we spoke to several physicians and gathered their feedback. They found the test to be interesting and promising. So next, we've contacted several medical schools and identified a clinician who also found the test to have a good promise. And so we wrote a federal grant application in order to pursue this clinical development. But then it turned out that being a team of scientists, we underestimated the commercial aspect of this development. So the proposal came back with a very good technical review, but also a strong criticism that we didn't talk to all stakeholders, especially the reviewers were concerned about the market size because the disease is rather rare. So they weren't not sure that healthcare insurance and clinical labs would be interested in adopting this test. So the recommendation was that we go ahead and speak with healthcare insurance companies and clinical labs to see how they feel about this particular application. And so this where our problem started, because it's a very complex ecosystem to navigate. So I really got lost in that. I'll share with you my sort of mind map that I created regarding this, the whole process. So, okay, we have this new clinical test, which seems to have a good potential. But then how do we find out what the healthcare insurance, what the clinical labs and healthcare providers think about it? So first, my first confusion was, what is the right order of doing this? Does it need to be approved by FDA first to healthcare companies and clinical labs to even think about it? Or we can initiate a conversation first and then get it approved. So the whole order thing was unclear to me, and it's still not quite clear to me. And then another problem that I found is that I had difficulties to even to think of how to approach the health insurance companies or clinical labs, because they're not very readily available. And it created a whole lot of questions of who exactly do I need to contact? Who makes a final decision? Is it possible to co-develop with them? And on top of everything, what is the presentation format? Because I'm concerned that if I get it in the wrong format, they just won't accept it, like not give enough attention to it just because the presentation is wrong. And so eventually I was able to connect with a representative of one of large clinical labs. And and then, so what happened, I submitted my summary of what I thought is important information. And I got back their feedback that they discussed it, and currently they are not interested in accepting or considering this test. But it would be very valuable if I would be able to get any feedback from this company regarding why is that they are not interested in that currently. Is that because of they don't see a merit in that? So we are coming to a criteria question. Is it, don't they think the diagnostic value is poor? Are they concerned about the cost of a test, or addressable market is the most important for them? I didn't get any feedback, and my request for a feedback didn't result in a follow-up. So basically, even though I've got in contact with them, I didn't get any feedback on what's the problem or what needs to be developed. Or so again, I'm coming to the same questions: what is the order? What is the format? What is the real criteria? And especially what is really needed to get clinical labs or health insurance companies interested, and what is a must. And I didn't find a clear roadmap. So this is when I contacted Kim and explained the situation to her, saying that I really need help in this. And it would be excellent if it's possible to get all stakeholders together and get some clear roadmap so we can navigate in developing of these tests. So this is my take on the situation with accepting clinical tests into practice. And I'm really hoping that together we can develop some approaches and to finally get an answers, clear roadmap on how to approach this. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Olena. I hope that that helped to clarify for everyone what we're getting at here, what we're trying to get at. So in discussion with Olena, I brought this up with Ashok, and we had some conversation based on his background, his experience with the medical supply chain, and we're going to hear from him now to talk about his perspective. So, Ashok, you are on.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Kim, for having me on this talk. Briefly, I have been providing, distributing medical equipment and supplies for the past 14 years. And I have advised a couple of companies who have started new medical products and helped them give them advice on how to best way to take to market. And then for the past few years, I've been doing health IT and have a telemedicine app that is out in the field now. So one thing that I would recommend anybody who's trying to bring out a new test or a new lab or a new equipment in the market is to figure out first what code, what procedure code best matches what they're trying to do. Is there something already out there that covers their test and a procedure code? Because creating a new procedure code is a long road, long process. As Olena said, you're trying to get to insurance companies, figuring out what they will cover, what they will not cover. And the way you create a procedure code is you have to go to CMS, Medicare, or other places and try to get a code from them. And that I think is a little longer process. But if you already have a similar test out in the market with a procedure code and you can follow in that procedure code, makes your life simpler because the reimbursements are already determined. Insurance companies have already accepted it. They're reimbursing it. And your test can be, if your test is novel, something different, something unique that falls under the procedure code, it may be simpler to get in the market that way. Otherwise, you have to figure out, what it does, why is it different, why does the industry need it, and try to get the procedure code approved by one insurance, Medicare, and then other insurance companies slowly adopt it. Another thing I would suggest is also look at the labs. Are they willing to accept that and adopt it and offer it to their clients for testing? And how much is going to cost them to do it? How much is going to cost you to produce this? How much is going to cost them to run the test? And figure out the reimbursement and see if it actually makes sense. And the third step will be, will a doctor, will a medical professional write for this test? Just because it's reimbursable, just because labs are willing to do it, doesn't mean a medical professional will wanting to write a prescription to have this done. So those are the things I think are very valuable to figure out ahead of time, so you can determine, is it valid, is it worth going forward or not.
So you talked a little bit when we spoke before. We talked about this idea of keeping your eyes on ROI as you're going through this whole process, right? So we don't want to develop something that is going to break the bank or not be sustainable in the future. Can you talk a little bit about that and what people need to consider, and how do they even begin to think about that, the cost of a test?
Right. I mean, you have to figure out what is your cost. How much does it cost you to get the raw materials? What machines are needed? Is the equipment that is needed to run the test already readily available in the labs? If not, they have to procure new equipment to run your tests. That adds cost to the lab. And how long will it take, and then figure out the reimbursement for the test. And how long will it take for the lab to pay for that equipment that they bought specially for your testing to get that done, or can your test be run on an existing equipment? If that is so, then the cost for a lab to run the test is less. And labs look at the reimbursement. If insurance reimburses it, they have to figure out, they have to make a profit at it. You have to make a profit at it, right? And on top of the ROI, you need to figure out how many doctors and what type of doctors will run this test. A new test just came out, a blood test that I learned about that is reimbursed very nicely. And this is a blood test that checks a person's metabolism for a whole list of medications. And doctors are starting to write that test because they see a very value in it, and especially for psychotropic drugs. It's very important to see which drugs metabolize how. So they're using, it's a new test that came out, and I talked to the labs and they say, yep, it's very profitable. They can run it. They actually go draw the blood. They're even incentivized to go to people's home, draw the blood, and come and run the test because it's worth it for them. And some other tests, like running your regular CBC test, they get reimbursed $8, and they have no incentive to do anything more than just run a vanilla test. So those are the kind of things you need to figure out: is how much profit there is for the labs, how much profit there is for you, and what incentive does a doctor have to write a test.
Okay, I think that actually brings us. Well, first, let me pause for a minute and remind people, if you have questions, just use the chat window to alert us that you want to talk about something. We want this to be a discussion and not just a one-sided conversation. So you described the blood test, and I think what you were saying is that it makes life easier for the doctors, right? It's a quicker test, it's easier, so it's more efficient. And that brings us to the next part of our discussion, which is, Olena talked about the challenges of getting to the right people. So do you have advice about that? Or Olena, do you have any clarifying conversation about the challenges of finding the right people to speak with? Oh, you're
muted.
unmute. Yes.
Yeah, so I would say in general, that was my biggest challenge, because all those other questions you can somehow figure it out or find information in the web or ask somebody, but getting to the right people is very difficult. I tried to use different communication channels, like writing request emails, trying to connect with people on LinkedIn, asking for personal introductions. And I was really, really surprised that even personal introductions, they usually don't go anywhere. So it was really hard. Eventually, the only person I was able to speak to is the one that I mentioned from one of the big clinical labs. It was because I've met him at a conference. So it seems like a best route, probably, if you can meet somebody in person at some event where they are specifically for that purpose, and they are open and willing to talk with you. So in my experience, that was the best way to connect with the right people.
So, Olena, you participated in a really important program that TEDCO put on to help with customer discovery, right? And how did you find that?
You're muted.
There you go.
I joined the local iCore program, which was provided by TEDCO. And right from the beginning, I knew that it would be very challenging to reach out to healthcare insurance company or clinical labs companies. So I didn't even try to go that route. I participated in this program with our test for research use. And even though the scientists are known to be more communicative, I think. I mean, maybe probably the wrong wording. I'm just meaning that it's easier to reach out to a scientist than to a clinical professional. And still, it was very difficult to reach out to people. So I can see it's really a major thing is to identify the right channels through which you can talk to your prospective customers. Yeah, but overall, the program was great. I've got the really good insights, and So the best discovery of that program was that we realized that we might have a different variation of a test to be more interesting for our customers, and also a format that initially we thought that we will sell it in the form of a kit. But while talking to customers, it turned out that many of them would prefer to have us doing the testing for them. So we incorporated into our business model another this service. So we are not going to do just the kit, but also advertised that we can provide measuring services for our customers. So overall, that was great, but in relation to the current conversation, I didn't even try.
So,
Kim,
yes, go ahead, Doug.
sorry,
Oh, sorry.
one thing that I wanted to really say is I think we need to figure out who is going to order these tests and why would they change what they're doing today to order these tests? Because people I have seen trying to take my telemedicine to market, changing person's behavior, both on the patient side and the doctor side, is very hard. They're used to certain way of doing things, and why would they want to do something new? There has to be a compelling reason for them to do that, and this is needs to become part of their habit. So they may say, yes, it's a great test, I would love it. That's the feedback that I used to get. But when you try to take it to market, oh, now I need to start using it, and that kind of brings a barrier that you need to help cross over so they start accepting it and using it.
I think that's an incredibly important point, is that we all have mental models about the things that we're doing, right? We believe in the work that we're doing. We're doing it because we think it's going to solve a problem for people. And we use our own mental models to try to develop these products and services. And the challenge is to try to get into the heads of the people that are going to buy it. And that's kind of what iCore is all about. So Doug, did you want to jump in with your question?
Yeah, it was kind of related to that. You know, in iCore, right, you have the principal investigator, you've got the entrepreneur, and then you've got the mentor. And, you know, I think the mentor's role is to try and get you into a diverse set of customers or potential interested parties. I guess it should be said more than that, and kind of along with what Ashok is talking about, you know, who are people that are going to buy it and stuff, which aren't always the scientists, which gives you that diversity of input. And it's uncomfortable sometimes, right? Kind of gets you out of your comfort zone, but I think that's part of their role, is to help with that. Did that not happen during your iCore program?
Oh my. So in the iCore program, I wanted to identify customers for the research application. So I intentionally didn't talk about the clinical application. So this is why, because I anticipated that it will be very challenging and I wouldn't be able to fulfill the requirement of talking to a good number of customers.
Okay.
So also in this whole customer discovery iCore discussion, I want to bring in Gary Evans, who is the executive director of the DevTech program. But Gary has also been an iCore mentor. He's started many businesses. He's run tech parks. He has a Ph.D. in some type of chemistry. That's significant, I'm sure. So I want Gary to kind of jump in and talk about how it has been for him to go through the iCore process several times, and maybe some ideas about how to embark on this customer discovery process.
Thanks, Kim. So I will do that, but I just wanted to make a couple of other comments. As I've been involved in starting several medical diagnostics companies, and this question of how you really understand what the market opportunity is very difficult because of the way the healthcare system operates in the US. And so, for example, I was involved on one occasion developing a product which had enormous medical utility and did exactly what it said it did, but we couldn't get it into the market because it meant it would be a loss of revenue for the doctors. And they said, yeah, it's a definite improvement over the existing thing we do, but we won't make as much money off it, so we're not going to use it. And it can be very difficult to get into that kind of conversation in advance. So we've adopted in the past a number of different approaches to getting in front of people. One is to take an academic pathway, if you like, and find people who are thought leaders in the condition or the disease state that you're targeting, and to approach them really, from an academic perspective and say, look, we're doing this work, we have this new device or this new test, and we would really like to talk to you about it, kind of compare notes, this kind of thing, because people in an academic context are very, familiar with doing that, very comfortable with doing that. And so finding people in the academic space who are real thought leaders in that condition is really useful. And particularly in medicine, most of these people are, have university faculty positions, but they are also practicing physicians as well. And if you can find those people and engage their attention, they can be enormously valuable, because the fact that they're thought leaders will mean that, people will pay attention to them, and they have exceptionally good networks. Obviously, to be able to do that, you have to have something which is sufficiently interesting to them, to engage with you. But I have in the past found it much easier to approach people in that context, to get into their networks. Another thing which is interesting to think about if you're developing a test is, more and more these days, testing is done on big clinical analyzers, and they're made by a relatively small number of firms. One way in is to try and think how you could configure your test in a format that would fit into one of those lab analyzers, because the companies that produce those are always looking for new tests to add to the portfolio of what they can offer. And if you can get the interest of the business development people in the, whether it's Abbott or Roche or whoever, they may give you a pathway in as well, because if they think, even if it's not necessarily something which is going to be a blockbuster, if it's just something that fills a gap in the test they have available, or gives them some broader range, then they can be willing to to participate in that as well. The third thing I was going to say, which is probably not helpful when you're at a very early stage, is that there are actually consultants who will do this for you. They're not that difficult to find, but they tend to be somewhat expensive. But they're basically people with phenomenal Rolodexes, and you can say to them, look, I want to get in and talk to 20 people in this specific domain, and they will help you do that. But like I say, kind of expensive. I think, going back to your original question, Kim, I think in the context of the ICOR program, You know, one of the big things that when you go through the ICO program, one of the big things they say is, you know, a good way to get in the door is to point out that you're a student and, you know, you're doing this as a kind of almost like a, you know, a project, if you like, even if that's not always strictly an accurate representation of things. But I think you can, even if that's not true for you individually, you know, I think you can still approach people and try to come at it tangentially and say, you know, not, oh, you know, I'm trying to develop this thing. I'm trying to, you know, find out some information about the market. You know, you can go in and you can say, look, we're doing research in this area. We think we're making some you know, interesting discoveries, but we really want to understand more about this whole space. You know, we don't really understand how the market works, and you know, we're just trying to get our heads around this. And obviously, as with the ICO program, generally people can just slam the door in your face. But you know, again, I'm working with teams. I found that to be quite useful. So, you know, kind of coming at it from the side, if you like, and just not really expanding on you know, your reason for wanting to talk to them. But once you're in the door, obviously, you'd be completely honest with them. But you know, it is difficult. There isn't a sort of simple solution to the thing.
So one of the things I know ICOR encourages people to do is to use some of their resources to attend conferences. Have you found that with teams you've worked with to be an effective way to get in front of people and make new connections?
Yeah, actually, based on you know, the experience that I've had, I would say it is the best way to get in front of people. You know, obviously it's contingent on there being a conference that's going to be happening within the relevant time frame. But you know, there's a lot of conferences that go on around the country and in other countries as well. And yeah, I mean, if you go to a conference that is particularly focused in the general domain that you're interested in, you can talk to a huge number of people in, you know, 2 or 3 days. I had one team who managed to speak to over 100 people at one conference, and you know, these weren't just kind of random people. They were relevant contacts to what they were trying to do.
I know that ICOR promotes, and I know we did in the FITSE Accelerator talk about the book Talking to Humans. So I'll just throw that out there as a resource for people. And that kind of explains the methodology and the mindset you should have when you're approaching people to get insight into their challenges and their problems related to the product or service that you're developing. And that is a free resource that's available online, and I can post that link somewhere, maybe in our MeetUp site.
One of the other things, Kim, that I think the ICO program is really good for is it, you know, really encourages people to understand the structure of the market and segment it, and you know, think about exactly how does the whole process work. You know, and in medical stuff, that's often generally reasonably well understood. But understanding this question of, you know, as Ashok was saying, you know, who is actually going to write the prescription? Who's actually going to carry out the test? You know, in a clinical lab, who actually makes the decision about what tests they're going to, you know, have available? Because often with the big analyzers, you know, these tests are done in little cartridges, and they may be produced by the manufacturer, and you may be getting a royalty on each test that they run. But the clinical lab director will be the one who makes those kinds of decisions. And I think the ICO program is very good at making you think those things through and really understand who are the decision makers in the different contexts. and you know, what are their priorities? So not just the lab people, but the people who prescribe, and even, heaven forbid, the patients as well occasionally.
The patients, we haven't even talked about them. So I think, you know, not everyone can get into I-Corps, but these thought processes and these methodologies are tools that anybody can use. I do want to wrap back around to our initial reason for having this discussion, which is, you know, thinking through and clarifying the questions we have about this whole process. So I will throw it open to any questions. And Olena, if you have any additional thoughts on that after this discussion that we've just had, please chime in.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Yeah, I'm good. So I think we can open a discussion.
Yes. We've had a couple people have to drop off, and they had messaged that they were going to need to leave, so we don't have their questions. But does anybody have any issues or want to discuss anything that we've brought up so far this morning?
So this is Doug Holly. Quick question, Olena. The chart that you started out with, that kind of laid out the 3 different areas you were concerned. I thought it was very interesting and a great way to capture the issues or the different processes. And I guess I wonder, I mean, we all like to see some linear path to the goal, and which is, I think, what you were asking for and looking for. So I guess my question in this area of medical research and so on, is it maybe the case that there really isn't generally a linear and path? I don't know if anybody knows. I'm just kind of curious.
Ashok might be able to weigh in on that.
Doug, this is kind of difficult because I don't think there is a linear path. There are, you know, multiple prongs, right? There is the lab that's you, the lab, equipment maker, the doctor, and the reimbursement insurance companies. I think we need to figure all this stuff out together, or else it's not going to work. If the insurance company approves it, has a code for it, lab is willing to run it, it is profitable for you, and the doctor doesn't want to write a prescription, you're stuck. So I think it needs to be figured out in multiple prongs, you know, figure out, open up all these gates so they all work together.
Mm-hmm. So that actually brings up a good point, and that, you know, the other part of this isn't just getting through this approval process to get into the medical supply chain, but on the other side, it's educating people, not just that something is available. And you know how challenging that's been with TotalCare. You have to, you know, raise awareness and explain what it is. Did you find that challenging?
Yes, it was very interesting. And I know Doug and I have had several conversations regarding it. When I was doing, I've taken mini I-Corps twice and did surveys. Everybody loved the features. They liked it. Doctors, patients liked it. And when it was out there, they looked at the prototypes. It was wonderful. They gave a few comments, and I incorporated the comments. When it was launched, 4 people raised their hands. They were early adopters, got them in there, got adopted, but no usage. What's going on? Oh, it's great. It's wonderful. I'm going to get around to it. I'm certainly going to get around to it. And that getting around to it never happened. That's what I was saying, you know, is changing the behavior. Here is the thing that's going to help them increase their schedule flexibility, increase revenue, but they don't want to take the step over the threshold to do that next step until coronavirus broke loose. And now everybody's scrambling for telemedicine, and people who were in the sidelines for months thinking about it suddenly want to deep dive into telemedicine and take it. Yes. So that was the thing. It's hard. It was very hard to take it to market. And now when it's out to the market, now it's, another thing. We tested it, everything was wonderful. Now we are in a market, now we are seeing the road bumps when other people are using it. We had to modify a few things on the application side, make it simpler. So that's another lesson learned, is just because your test is run perfectly, it all works with you in your lab, you doing it, even some other people doing it. When you put it out in the field, other people are running it, you're going to find hiccups that you will need to come back and modify and tweak and take it out again until it all, works perfectly.
I think what you said applies to every business everywhere, even with DefTech. It's an absolutely free program. It's run by the state. We do that on behalf of the state, but we have had to tweak our processes, tweak who it is we're really looking to support. And then once we meet businesses and talk to them about what we offer, it's still a matter of timing for them. And I think what you're talking about now, that, with the coronavirus, people are saying, oh, this is now a priority. Whereas maybe, 3, 4, 6 months ago, telemedicine was okay. Maybe most practices didn't need it. The people most concerned were rural. So understanding timing, having kind of a big picture look at your ecosystem, the ecosystem that your product or technology resides in, is really important. I want to share Chuck Ernst, who is on. Chuck is with the SBDC in Maryland, and Chuck. Oh, yes. So Chuck shared with us a tool that we use. Lots of the iCore program uses this. We use it for the pitch competition I run down here in Southern Maryland, and that is Strategizer's business model canvas, as a way to kind of lay out your process, lay out the important people and steps and activities you need to go to for your business. So Chuck, do you want to talk some more about that? And then Raghu, yes, I would like you to make a comment.
Well, Kim, I'm not with SBDC, I'm with TEDCO, but that's all right. We do use the iCore, the virtual iCore program that Olena participated in. And with respect to the business model canvases, I don't remember if you were there yesterday, but Kathy had a very good webinar on 7 possible changes to the business model canvas in this virus situation, that actions potentially that people could take and the attendant risks, and et cetera. I very well understand Olena's difficulties with the iCore, and I followed her through that. It's just, it's very important to get the reactions of the potential buyers, but it was very hard for her to reach those people because of the nature of her product.
Yes. Okay, so no, I did not attend Kathy's event. It would be great if she had recorded that and we could share that link with people. I will email Kathy or Ivana and see if we can get that. Raghu, you had a comment you wanted to make?
Yes. Hi everyone. Good morning. I want to first share all the experiences that Olena went through. I know I share her pains and problems as well. When we have this medical device for arrhythmia, atrial fibrillation detector, and we have FDA approval, we have done clinical studies, we have the market, but the insurance is the biggest block for us because we're not able to meet the people in the insurance industry. So we are still trying on that part. Now, I had a couple of questions as well for you. That's my comment. And the other comment I want to make, yes, is that timing is everything. And it looks like now because of this telemedicine, because of the coronavirus, a lot of doctors want to monitor their patients remotely. This might be a good opportunity for us if we still get the right people to contact, because this can be done using telemedicine, this monitoring of their irregular heartbeats. Now, I have a question that is ICOR open for small businesses? And I also wrote to TEDCO. Her name is Anne Balduzzi. I never got a response from her regarding some help for accessing the market for our device. Any comments, Kim, that you could make on this, or any of the other people here?
Actually, I'm going to ask Chuck to chime in, since Chuck is with TEDCO. I mean, he can't speak for Anne, but I mean, he can definitely talk about their ICOR process and help you get in touch with the person you might need to get in touch with.
Yeah, I just is ICOR only for university affiliated small companies, or anybody can enroll in that?
No, well, the TEDCO, we're the ones who paid for developing the virtual ICOR. The other ICOR programs were primarily university related, at least in the metropolitan region. The virtual program is available for rural companies that we have had projects with. With respect to your reaching out to Anne, I don't know what she would have advised you, but one thing that TEDCO has available to any small businesses, they have market databases that can be accessed from, I think, 3 points, from Columbia, from Germantown, and from Baltimore. And those are frequently used by people in the biotech and health services fields.
So,
All right.
Chuck,
Thank you, Chuck.
we have another Chuck on the line. Do you want to chime in on ICOR?
Sure. Am I unmuted?
You are unmuted.
Yeah, I can't hear me. But yeah, this is Chuck Montague. And I've been working with ICOR here for a while. And GW has a program that I work with that I think it was for DC companies, but it was a Maryland group that started it. Hopkins has a mini ICOR program that I know outside teams have gotten into. It's certainly not for just established companies. ICOR encourages people maybe before they start companies to do this customer discovery using the business model canvas. And that's why I posted that link to, it's a half a book that Strategizer puts out, but it works through all the components of the business model canvas.
Okay, yes, the Strategizer has a couple books that are great. The value proposition book is really helpful. One of the things I want to do, I have some, first, Raghu, I don't think everyone can see the comments. I'm not sure about that, but Raghu, Ashok would like you to get in touch with him, and I can facilitate that introduction by email once we get off of this webinar. I'm going to put someone on the spot right now. Sue Carr is with us today, and Sue Carr has developed a one-step needle. Sue, can you talk about your needle and talk about the process of going through everything that you've gone through to this date, FDA approval, whatever step you're in right now? And you need to unmute yourself.
Hi. I'm Sue Carr. I'm president of Cartech LLC. It's a that I founded when I built a better filter device. The filter is called the FROG, which is an acronym for filter removal of glass. And the problem is certain medications that need to be filtered require a complicated process. So Cartech has simplified the process by eliminating the complicated steps and developing a one needle, one package solution that's safer, quicker, easier, and greener. Does that kind of explain things? And actually, I was on the phone with Kathy yesterday. I did take the George Washington Intro to ICOR program They did not recommend me to continue because I was too far along. I have my Bisnell model canvas like in front of me, if you guys can see that. Because I'm taking a builder fund class, and and so I'm kind of prepared for this afternoon. So it is kind of complicated to figure out who you need to speak to, your revenue streams, your value prop, and your customer segment, and how that all links together. This was actually a really good exercise for me because I was able to link most of my customer segments to my value prop, which also links to the channels that you have to go through and your customer relationships and who your key partners are. And then, think about your cost structure and your key resources and key activities. So that's where I'm at right now. I have a 10 o'clock meeting this morning, and I have an 11 o'clock, and I'm just on the phone and doing these webinars all day.
Yes. Thank you, Sue. Have you found it challenging to get to the people that you needed to get to, or do you think that, your background and your connections as a pharmacist have been incredibly helpful?
Yeah, well, one of my secret sauces are my backgrounds and connections. So it wasn't as challenging for me to get, and also being in I was in a Innova Personalized Health Accelerator program, so I was able to reach the people at Innova, and I was able to speak with my hospital friends at Shady Grove and at Frederick Memorial, and so I was able, and then from there they introduced me to other people. So I was able to get up to the chain and speak with the thought leaders at FDA, at ASHP, at USP, and at Kaiser, the FDA representative that goes to meetings down in DC. He was actually the only one that cared about waste. Believe it or not, the healthcare industry doesn't care about waste, and that's kind of sad. But my other value propositions, I probably conducted about 150 user studies and discovery questionnaires. So I was able to validate my value prop. And I'm sorry about my dog.
That's fine. We all have things like that in our homes right now. Olena, do you have any questions for Sue? I know the two of you know each other well and have went through the FTSE Accelerator together. And I hadn't thought of it from this perspective, but she's, obviously moving through this whole supply chain at a pretty good clip, I think.
I cannot come up with one right now, but I definitely need to talk with you more about your experience in that. So maybe we can talk about how you went through the whole process of getting an FDA approval and reaching out to people in the field.
So to get back to our, part of our purpose this morning, we did want to talk about this whole vexing challenge of finding the right people as you're going through a customer discovery process. But to get back to, do we have some clarifying questions, some questions that are kind of bubbling up to the top that we want to develop a forum where we bring different experts in, maybe from the insurance industry, maybe some buyers in labs and doctors. Where do we want to go from here? Have you heard anything, Olena, that helps us to identify what the things are that we don't know? I think that's primarily what we're trying to do.
I think it was very interesting comment from Douglas regarding that, and this is true. I'm trying to identify a linear path in getting this test from the lab to acceptance by clinicians and healthcare companies, but there is probably not a linear path. So I think we need to think about how, so it complicates things even more. So how we can get everything moving at the same time. And I think I'm sticking to my 3 questions on approach and criteria. To me, it feels that it's important to present your case in the right way. And what I've noticed, especially through the participating in I-Core program, that the way scientists think, it's different from the way that business people think. And very often the things or approaches that I think is important from a scientific point of view, it's not that important from a business point of view, and they want me to present them with a different information. And especially in the beginning, it was very difficult to connect this two, because I have zero business background and just jumping from academia to starting a business, it was really, really challenging. But with the help of I-Core program, I think I got much better in that. But still, I would really love to have a sort of a roadmap, sort of a general framework of. So here's the thing we want from you in order for health insurance companies to start the conversation, to get them interested at the minimal level. So these are the basic requirements for them. And then, so here are the basic requirements for the clinical labs to get interested. I think for me, these are the most important aspects.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm having conversation in 3 different areas here. I'm getting messages in a couple places. You know, when Ashok shared with us his understanding and talked about, you know, we initially started out with some questions about what's the sequence, and I am with you. I want a linear process. I love a good process, and I love it when a process works. And this is a process, but it's a messy process. I think is what we're getting to. But Ashok shared some information about. You know, you don't start with the doctor. You have to talk to the doctor, and I don't think you can wait to talk to the end user or the potential end user. But even getting to the insurance industry, understanding those the codes and figuring that whole piece of it out. Since people are coming at building businesses for medical devices or tests like you are, from so many different perspectives. We heard from Sue, who came from within the industry. And so she had these great contacts. You came from academia, and you have the burden not just of developing an appropriate test, but also learning the business side of things. And that's it has a very different look and feel to it. So the other thing is, you know, getting to the labs. How do you get their attention? I think there's a lot. I think we have clarified some questions. I think we can pull something together that will be meaningful and useful. Ashok, did you want to comment?
Yes, Kim. Yes, I think the first step, if I could linearize some of this stuff, first step would be figuring out the reimbursement. Without that, the chain will not move forward. Figuring out the reimbursement and what is the monetary incentive for the lab to run the test. People come to my location and saying, hey, there's a great medical equipment, would you carry it? My very first question is, what is the code? What is my cost? What is the reimbursement? If that makes sense to me, then I will offer it and carry it. Otherwise, I say, sorry, I have way too many things going on. I don't want to carry another product that's not going to make me money. And once you have that code, you can go to the lab and get the lab excited about the reimbursement, the cost versus reimbursement, how much excess their profit. Once you have the lab excited, even one lab excited, then you can ask them, what doctors do you have connections with that send the orders to your lab? every lab has a rep that goes to doctor's offices and tells them, hey, these are the costs, this is the test we run. And they can also recommend a certain test. Hey, guess what? Olena came to me with this great new test and it can save you XYZ. Since the doctor and the lab rep already have a relationship, that is a good way to get that introduced to the doctor's office. And then when you come back behind them and say, by the way, let me give you some information, that I think moves the process forward. But without the reimbursement, you have no conversation.
Yeah. I think for someone like Olena, who's been, as she said, she came from academia, and colleagues of hers that are in the same situation. That's one of the reasons we wanted to have this forum today, or this discussion, is because she does talk to other people that are doing similar work to what she's doing, that are building, had been doing bench level research and now are trying to develop products or tests. It's this confusion and this massive information you have to take in, and still you get to, does linear really make sense? And it probably doesn't, because at some point you need to know before you even approach the labs that you have a test that is really needed by doctors, right? That it's filling a gap, that there's something missing or an inefficiency. And I know that's what one of the things Olena's test does is it provides additional efficiency. It makes things go faster. So these are all good thoughts. I want to ask anybody if there are any additional questions or any other thoughts that anyone wants to share. And I have a comment in the chat window. Okay, then I think we are going to wrap up. I wanted to thank you, everyone, again, Olena and Ashok, especially for your time, and not just today, but in preparing for this. We've had several conversations. This has been going on for a while. Gary, thank you for coming in and talking about iCore. Chuck, thank you for your insight, and Raghu for your questions. I'm glad everyone was able to join us. Doug, I appreciate your insight here. And we will, we're getting a few questions. Let me see. It's managing the sideboard and being able to see everyone. Yes, I think we're getting some agreement that, having a process is a great thing. Linear is not really going to happen. And we're going to have to learn to live with a degree of messiness in all of this. But we will follow up with everyone. We want to have more of these types of conversations. In a couple weeks, we want to have another meetup talking about some of the resources. The state of Maryland has done a phenomenal job in getting information out. And as a state resource, we want to make sure that we're sharing that as much as possible as well. It's confusing. And in 2 weeks, when we want to have another meetup, things will have changed quite a bit. The pace of change today is just almost incomprehensible. So we'll try to bring some people together and talk through what's available and who's doing what. And I hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Cough into your elbow, wash your hands, stay home or in your backyard, or just generally